Welcome to this explainer. Let's jump right into this, because today we are exploring a deeply fascinating yet highly destructive psychological phenomenon, the cyclical nature of moral panics. We're going to trace a direct line from the massive collective hysteria of the 1980s, what we all know as the Satanic Panic, all the way to the digital conspiracies completely dominating our modern internet. It's a really wild journey about how fear spreads, how minds are manipulated, and ultimately how completely innocent lives get caught in the crossfire. Here is our agenda for today. We'll be looking at the 1980s Satanic Panic, the McMartin Nightmare, the science of manufacturing false memories, the devastating human cost, the modern mutation into Pizzagate and QAnon, and finally, the ongoing danger of moral panics.
Let's start with Section 1, the 1980s Satanic Panic, Society's Hidden Demons. Okay, so to really grasp where we are today, we first have to go back to the 1980s. During this decade, the United States was completely gripped by the Satanic Panic. This was a massive, widespread collective hysteria, a nationwide paranoia that firmly believed everyday entertainment was intrinsically linked to hidden, diabolical cults operating right in the shadows of American suburbs. And what's incredibly fascinating is just how mundane the targets were. I mean, this cultural panic aggressively targeted normal youth culture. You had religious groups accusing role-playing games like Dungeons & Dragons of literally promoting witchcraft and suicide, basically claiming kids couldn't tell reality from fantasy. Then, heavy metal bands like Judas Priest and Iron Maiden were actually dragged into courtrooms. They were accused of backmasking, which was this idea of hiding inverted subliminal messages in their tracks to incite murder. This entire wave of fear eventually culminated in the 1985 Parents Music Research Center, or PMRC, which is exactly what birthed those famous black and white parental advisory labels on explicit music.
Moving right along to Section 2, the McMartin Preschool Nightmare, Hysteria in the Classroom.
So, this generalized cultural fear didn't just stay aimed at record labels and board games, right? It eventually boiled over into the McMartin preschool case. Now, this became the longest, most expensive criminal trial in U.S. history, and it was driven from start to finish by pure, unadulterated panic. It was triggered back in 1983 by a single accusation from a mother who, and this was discovered much later, was actually suffering from undiagnosed schizophrenia. But instead of a careful, measured investigation, the whole situation rapidly spiraled out of control. By the mid-1980s, the hysteria was so intense that the FBI was literally excavating the preschool grounds with heavy machinery. They were out there searching for non-existent secret tunnels. It took 7 grueling years, all the way until 1990 before the madness finally broke, and all charges were dropped, resulting in full acquittals for the teachers.
And the accusations during this time, they reached the level of a modern Salem witch trial. Seriously, when you look at what was being claimed, it completely defies all logic. Authorities were seriously investigating claims from toddlers that they were forced into underground tunnels, that animal sacrifices were happening, and get this, even that children were magically made to fly. They even investigated accusations that martial arts star Chuck Norris, along with local police officers, was partaking in demonic rituals at the school. It sounds like a movie, but the authorities absolutely believed it all.
This brings us to Section 3, Manufacturing False Memories, the Science of Manipulation. Now, you might reasonably wonder, how in the world did so many different children make these exact same bizarre claims? Well, the terrifying answer didn't come out until the trial, and it all boils down to massive, coercive psychological manipulation by incredibly inexperienced therapists. During the trial, defense attorneys and scientific experts reviewed the videotapes of the interviews, and they discovered that the lead social worker, Key McFarlane, used 4 deeply unethical tactics. First off, she used intense social pressure, telling kids things like, well, all the other kids already told me, so don't play dumb. Second, she asked highly suggestive questions, directly implanting ideas rather than asking open-ended ones. Third, she literally rewarded fantastical lies with praise while actively ignoring or punishing the children when they told the truth. And fourth, she introduced highly inappropriate, anatomically detailed dolls to preschoolers. Actually, scratch that. She wasn't just interviewing them. She was literally feeding these bizarre stories to the children. And the kids, they just wanted to please the authority figure in the room.
The absolutely crucial takeaway here is the success rate of this kind of manipulation. Later scientific studies, like the SIR model out of the University of Texas, proved that these specific, highly coercive interview techniques had a shocking 58% success rate in making completely healthy, normal children invent false accusations against entirely innocent adults.
And this brilliantly illustrates the whole concept of false memories. This absolute disaster of a trial is what birthed the widespread forensic study into memory, pioneered by experts like Elizabeth Loftus. They proved that human memory is not a video recorder, It is highly malleable. Fake events can absolutely be implanted into a person's mind via repetition and fear. This permanently ended the old legal dogma that children never lie, and completely reformed the protocols the FBI and police use to interview minors today, strictly prohibiting that kind of suggestive questioning.
Let's look at Section 4, the devastating human cost. Lives ruined by lies.
While the scientific and legal communities learned some very valuable lessons and completely reformed their protocols, the human cost was just irreversible ruin. During a moral panic, the presumption of innocence vanishes entirely. Take Ray Buckey, for example. He suffered 5 years of unjust imprisonment just waiting for trial. When he finally got out, he tried to go to law school to help others, but protests forced the school to cancel his admission. Then you have Peggy Buckey, who spent almost 2 years in jail. She fought to get her teaching license back, but no school would ever hire her because of the lingering stigma. And Virginia McMartin, the 70-year-old founder of the school, she literally watched her family home get bulldozed to the ground, eventually dying in bankruptcy shortly after the trial ended. And here is the real kicker. Despite their absolute proven innocence, none of these individuals ever received an apology. Not from the state, not from the media that sensationalized the story, and certainly not from the clinic that manipulated the children. Their destroyed lives stand today as a permanent monument to the incredible danger of media-fueled witch hunts.
On to Section 5, Pizzagate and QAnon, the digital mutation.
Now, you might think society learned its lesson after the 1980s, right? But the exact same core lie, this idea that a powerful elite abuses children in a secret underground network, it didn't die. It simply mutated for the internet age. This brings us to late 2016. The Pizzagate internet conspiracy formed on forums like Reddit and 4chan. The claim was that political elites were trafficking children in the secret basement of a family restaurant in Washington, D.C. called Comet Ping Pong. This online hysteria drove an armed man to travel all the way from North Carolina to the pizzeria to, quote-unquote, save the children. He actually fired an assault rifle inside the building. But he peacefully surrendered to police minutes later when he realized a terrifying physical reality: the restaurant literally didn't even have a basement. The entire premise was physically impossible.
But unfazed by these facts, the hysteria simply evolved. Starting in 2017, during the Trump presidency, it grew into the massive QAnon movement. The conspiracy theorists added these absurd, almost medieval-style myths, claiming elites were harvesting a chemical called adrenochrome from children to use as a youth elixir. Driven entirely by digital echo chambers and extreme political polarization, this movement swelled rapidly. And as our source material highlights, this specific conspiracy theory ultimately served as a primary ideological engine behind the violent January 6th Capitol raid back in 2021.
Finally, Section 6, the danger of moral panics. History repeating.
The consequences of this modern panic have been severely tangible. The FBI eventually took the unprecedented step of classifying QAnon as a domestic terrorism threat. This happened after heavily radicalized believers, who were convinced they were literally fighting demons, committed acts of violence and even murder against their own family members. It proves that the psychological mechanism of the moral panic remains fully intact today. And this brings us to a really chilling realization. Today, we no longer need an inexperienced social worker to manipulate a handful of children in a single preschool room to start a panic. Digital echo chambers and internet algorithms have completely automated the process. They're more than enough to manipulate thousands of adults into repeating medieval myths about ritual sacrifice.
Which leaves us with a critical, deeply unsettling question to consider as we wrap up this explainer. How vulnerable does our society really remain to collective hysteria when a simple digital rumor can destroy an innocent life just as effectively as a 1980s witch hunt? It's definitely something we all need to reflect on the next time we see an outrageous claim shared online. Thank you so much for joining me to explore this complex topic, and always keep questioning what you read.